Welcome back, folks. It's Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Network. Matt Derrick is here with me today, that way, and I am going to go over with him all the things that have kind of stood out. We have a couple of bits of news. Thank you for making us your first listen. This is going to be a lot of fun. Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
ChiefsDigest.com is where you can find Mr. Matt Derrick. How are you, Matt?
I am doing well, Ryan. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's a Tuesday, and I'm going to take it for all that it's worth.
It is a Tuesday, but for whatever reason, every time I've heard today that the Chiefs played a 13-7 game on Sunday, I'm like, that can't be right? That I didn't really see a 13-7 game on my Sunday afternoon, did I?
Unfortunately,
apparently I did.
Yes, but it was followed with that big letter W, so it's going to be
so it's okay.
acceptable.
So it's a good kind of 13-7.
I guess if there is such a thing, we're just going to have to take it for what it's worth. So on a Tuesday, a normal day that's pretty light around the league, right? Had some transactions, some interesting things. They're going to go into this, and we've seen a lot of activity, a lot of interest lately on the defensive side. This seems to be mostly focused on the offense. Looks like cut a practice squad player, brought back Darrell Williams, the lineman, back onto the practice squad, get a little depth there. I don't know if that's related to the LDT trade or just trying to generally make that ebb and flow continue. I think the big one is also on the offensive line in that they have put still on the PUP list, I believe, but Kyle Long is back at practice. Is that, I think, going to be 3 weeks that they have to make that decision?
Right. They've got 21 days, 3 weeks, essentially. Yeah, before they have to make a decision on bringing him back to the active roster. At that point, I mean, if he doesn't come back to the active roster, he would be out for the rest of the season on injured reserve. This is a good sign, and it certainly fits in with what we kind of expected, that, hey, it would probably be about midseason that Kyle Long comes back. Obviously, I mean, he could be ready immediately if they need him. They've got a couple of injuries that they're dealing right now with both Mike Remmers and Lucas Niang both dealing with some things. Kyle Long can play right tackle. Whether he should play right tackle is another discussion. But he could certainly be thrown into the mix. This would also work out pretty well timing wise if the plan is just to have him back ready to come back after the bye week. Gets a couple of weeks to get some practice time in, and then after the bye would be good and ready to go. Two timelines that could be going. I mean, we'll find out from Andy Reid a little bit more on Wednesday, maybe what the plan is. But he would certainly, by returning to practice, at least be an option if Niang and Remmers are both unable to go this week.
Now, I mentioned that in preseason when he first got hurt, that, like in a pinch with all what we thought was the log jam at right guard, that maybe you could give him some reps there. Obviously, he's fairly far removed from being the right tackle that he was back in the day when he was playing at a very high level. But the situation has changed. You don't need anything at right guard right now. I think Trey Smith has that in a stranglehold. So for me, it's about when we find out the nature of Lucas Niang's ribs in particular, I think is going to be the determining factor, whether they even have to look at it or not, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't know, I mean, what the rib issue specifically is. We haven't heard. Don't normally get that update until Wednesday unless it leaks out. And so far it hasn't leaked out to me or anybody else. So we're still kind of flying blind a little bit here on how bad that is. But let's say worst case scenario, I mean, right tackle playing with cracked or bruised or, broken ribs, not ideal. I've talked to some guys, offensive linemen who've said, yeah, they would not want to play with an injury like that. Now, if it's something much more mild, I mean, certainly that he could be back. So, let's not count the chickens quite yet. And we know Remmers has been dealing with the knee issue, caused him to miss a couple of games now. So that has not seemed so severe that the Chiefs plan to put him on IR. That hasn't happened. So It's definitely a shorter term injury that they feel like with Remmers. But you do have a short-term possible need, and you certainly need some depth because, right now, I mean, you've got Andrew Wiley and Prince Tega Wanongo, who could be your options at tackle, but that's getting pretty thin all of a sudden.
I agree with that. And I think Wiley had an up and down outing is probably the best way to put it, because I think there were some decent snaps upon further review. But if you don't have to use him in that capacity, I think that's probably best. But really, the best option are for those two guys to get healthy, and then you have both Wiley and Long as cross the board depth and more guys that have a lot of experience that you could bring in if there's another injury, right?
Absolutely, and Kyle Long, like I said, can be a backup at multiple positions. I mean, just because you may not at this point in his career be wanting him to be your permanent starter at right tackle and might not be your first option, still is viewed at this point as a very good guard. So yeah, I mean, being able to have that depth in case anything happens to either Tooney or Smith, or frankly, I mean, if you need help at center and Humphrey goes down, you can maybe move somebody else there. You got a lot of options, and Long's at least flexibility gives you a lot of choices.
Yeah, this is going to be a nice mid-season pump in the arm here in case you have to do something. There's some changes going on with this roster as well. We saw some changes in this game and what they're going to boil down to. We're going to get to that coming up next. Hey, Chiefs fans, want to let you know about an incredible app that everybody who drives or buys gas all by itself needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. Our listeners right now, you get 25 cents off of every gallon that you buy once you sign up with Get Upside. Then on top of it, they're offering right now with a promo code of touchdown, an extra 25 cents, a bonus that you get back. That's 50 cents cash back on every gallon of gas that you buy in your first tank with the Get Upside app. There's a lot of people that drive around and put a lot of miles and a lot of gallons into their vehicles, and they're making a lot of cash back on this. All you have to do to become one of them is to sign up, get that app, Get Upside, and use the promo code touchdown. Then you can get all your rewards back through your bank account, PayPal, or e-card, whatever you would like. Go over there, get the Get Upside app, and use that promo code touchdown. Now, hey, things have changed, Matt. It's been a week or two, and now we get to talk about the defense first. It's like everything's coming up roses for me.
We're talking about the good thing, and we're talking about defense first. Let's roll.
Reel your jaw back in. I know it's tough. Obviously some very good performances. One that I think that was a little bit unheralded. We spoke post game, but that was a generality. Upon reflection, how do you feel about what the addition of Ingram does to this front?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think that the addition to Ingram is that it gets the Chiefs to be able to better play Steve Spagnuolo football, which Steve Spagnuolo's what he wants to do in his dream world is that he wants to get teams in the third and long. That's his dream scenario. He just wants to slow teams down to a point where at some point, doesn't have to be the first one, doesn't have to be, early in the drive. At some point, he wants to get a defense into a third and long and just be able to go after the quarterback. And we saw that. I mean, I think that they did a better job of putting the Packers into some third and, less than manageable positions. And now he's got the horses on a third and third down to be able to go after the quarterback, because when you've got a Melvin Ingram, a Frank Clark, and a Chris Jones, and especially with Clark now looking healthy and Ingram appears healthy. Jones, we know, is not going to be 100% this year with the wrist, but I thought he looked a lot better against the Packers, more comfortable playing inside than he had looked on the edge this year. You get those three elements together, that's three pieces of a really good third down package. So, I mean, yeah, I think that we saw a glimpse of what the Chiefs defense can be if they start playing Steve Spagnuolo football. The one big caveat to that is going to be they've got to start playing better on first and second downs. And I thought they did that too. I mean, I thought that they did a pretty good job against the Packers.
Yeah, for the most part, I would say that. I still think that there's some glitches there at the second level, but I think the Ingram addition, to me, a couple things that stood out is came in, got a pressure on his first pass rush. I think that is indicative of just where he is naturally in terms of the injury, but also the age. The age is always a question, right? But I also saw a nice spin move over there, saw a nice rip. And then at the end of the game, he's bull rushing it and collapsing the pocket again. So he was able to make it through the contest. And with Frank feeling better, I feel like that is now not just guys that know each other, but a little bit of a healthy rivalry inside the locker room that this should feed upon itself and help them bring Chris along if he's back to normal. I think the shortcuts, when you're injured, I think the shortcuts at your home position are a little bit easier and more natural than they are when you're trying to play out of position at the end. So overall, we should see more production from them going forward, right? Especially when Melvin got the same amount of pressure as Frank here in about half the snaps.
Yeah, I'm really bullish on what those three can do. I mean, and some of it is going to absolutely be contingent on managing the workload of that group. What we don't know, I mean, it wasn't really unclear, and Melvin Ingram was really transparent with us about what was the issue in Pittsburgh. I mean, he played a lot early in Pittsburgh and then saw his playing time decrease, and all indications are that relationship did not finish in a good place in Pittsburgh. Was playing time the issue? If playing time was the issue, and he's playing 46% of the snaps like he did the other night, that could become an issue again. But I think that's where he needs to be. I mean, Ingram at this point in his career with those knees and the history that he's had with them, and a 17-game regular season with what the Chiefs, if they get where they want to be, is a 4-game postseason. I mean, if you want to get Melvin Ingram to February, 46% of the snaps is where he needs to be. I'm just not sold that that's where, where the Frank Clark and Chris Jones are. I mean, Clark played 87% of the snaps. Jones played 71. That might be a little more than I want Jones to be playing right now just because of that wrist injury. Mm-hmm. A healthy Frank Clark can handle a workload like that, but that's still a lot of snaps on him in a long season. So I still think that they need some help from other guys to be able to contribute, and it just doesn't have to be those three guys that get most of the work. I mean, they need to be able to work a Tershawn Wharton in. Mike Dana needs to be able to contribute. They need to get some guys to, get some of them some rest. Because that workload, like I said, that's okay for Ingram. I think that's still a little bit too much for Clark and Jones. But again, I mean, if you took those guys off the field for 10 snaps, would you have been able to get the same production that you got against Green Bay? I don't think so. Not the way the rest of the guys are playing right now.
Yeah, and maybe they can grow into that. So the rotation is a little bit more back and forth. I expect Mike Dana and Alex Okafor to continue to play. But they're protecting a linebacker group that I think was fine against the run against A.J. Dillon. I'm actually pretty happy with the way that the run defense stood up. But again, Hitch coming back into the middle, Nick Bolton going back out to the Sam, or even a Will at a couple of snaps that I saw, doesn't set him up for success. I thought he was exposed again. Not a bad game by any means, but certainly not what we've seen from Nick Bolton when he's been in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something unfortunately, I think that Chiefs fans are just going to have to live with, because I see no indication at this point that the Chiefs are going to relent on Anthony Hitchens and the workload that he's getting right now. I mean, I think that's going to be pretty consistent. He played half the snaps essentially the other night, and that's probably on the, I mean, if you're a fan of Anthony Hitchens playing less, that's probably as low as you're going to get. I'm assuming that as he gets a little bit more healthy, that you'll probably see that workload increase a bit. That game was also a little bit unusual in the sense that, the Chiefs really went to their third down package pretty early in the second half. So, that's why, you see Neiman's snaps are a little bit higher than I think they would normally be. Hitchens is a little bit less. Bolton's a little bit less. They really went to, going to that third down package on even first and second down, and obviously passing situations a lot in the second half. So take that with a grain of salt. But no, I mean, at this point, I see no indications whatsoever that Steve Spagnuolo is going to let Anthony Hitchens leave that Mike role. It's going to be him. It's going to be Ben Neiman on third downs, and maybe Nick Bolton's going to fill in here on a series or there, or a couple of snaps in specific packages, but that's it. And I'm with you. I mean, I at this point, it's absolutely clear that what we've seen in this body of evidence, Nick Bolton is much more comfortable in the middle than he is on the sides.
Yeah. On the positive side, Willie Gay played the most out of any of the linebackers at that level, so I think they got to keep that up. And clearly a standout night for L'Jarius Sneed in allowing not just the fact that if it wasn't for that one a concussion check, he probably would have played the whole game, along with Ward, Thornhill, and Matthew. As long as you have those four, I feel like that's the mixture that can produce a defense that held arguably the best receiver in football to a very low night for his output. I feel very optimistic about what they were able to do as well. Do you see any hiccup in those four being able to be the main four going forward, and we'll mix in whoever's going to be the third CB?
No, I think that group is coming together pretty well right now. I mean, it is positive that the Chiefs have finally accepted Juan Thornhill as being the full-time guy back there, and that's, Sorensen is just coming down in specific packages. it's looking at Sorensen's numbers. I mean, it's still problematic, even in the role that he's playing. I mean, and I've just been looking at the long-term trend. I mean, yeah, it's to a point now where I think you just have to accept that, hey, Dan Sorensen's in the twilight years of his career, and maybe there's needs to be some other options there. Even in those like those said, those third down packages where he's playing exclusively right now. But no, I liked what the rest of that group is doing, and I really feel good about Rashad Fenton being that number 3 guy right now. I feel like that's a pretty good rotation that they've got. And the one thing and I go back to our conversation on after the game on Sunday. I don't know if Traveris Ward's getting enough credit for moving around the way that he did and working on both sides against Devontae Adams. I mean, it was basically he was on Adams on the outside and Sneed was on him on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of mix-ups here and there, but that was the first time that we've seen Traveris Ward be tasked with traveling with a guy. And he stepped up and did it.
He did. He did the one thing that we know that he's never done in the past successfully, and he managed the second one pretty well, getting his head around on some of those balls. Like, that's an evolution for Traveris Ward. And like I said, I've always considered him a good CB2 and not a lead. And right now, with I think clearly Jerry's stepping up to be the CB1 on this team, they need him to be that too and continue to play hungry and play aggressive like that. I think it's a great sign overall. There are a lot of signs, folks. There's some on offense too. Maybe a little bit of my topic of the day. We'll see what Matt thinks. You got to love the holidays, all the food, the treats, and plenty of them. But you might want a yummy dessert that isn't so full of calories and sugar. It's a perfect time for a Built Bar. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. They taste incredible. We've gone over them. We have all the new ones, blueberry muffin. You have the chunk cookie dough. You got to love that, as well as my favorite, coconut. You got to love the coconut brownie chunk. It is the best one out there. And feast for something delicious, and that's how you feel about these bars. You need to have one of those as well. Every single one is about 130 to 150 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and plenty of protein, upwards of 15 grams per bar, versus a slice of pie that's over 300 calories. You got to get into this, and this is a just as good tasting and a better way to eat, especially around your holidays. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, and high protein, covered in 100% real chocolate. Built is the great option whenever you're hungry, whether it's Thanksgiving weekend or all the way through Christmas and even New Year's. They're all coming here right now, and it's time for a Built Bar or two. All the new surprises, all the new flavors that are always coming out every few days, it feels like. There's plenty to check out over at Built.com. You can share some at your family gatherings too. Maybe even get your aunt to try a Built Bar. You never know. There's always a few surprises, some limited edition flavors that are always coming out. And right now, the offer is over at Built.com. If you use the code LOCKED15, you're going to end up getting 15% off of your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Okay, so maybe I'm a little giddy. Maybe I'm reading things in. But when I did my film review this week, a couple of things popped out at me. Not only were they able, especially in a close game that they have not had to play that much over the last few years, right? Obviously, this season is different. But to grind that out, to be able to run the ball effectively when you needed to for the most part, and to finish the game in the last 4:49 or whenever they got the ball back, I felt like that drive in particular, they started to look a little bit like themselves in terms of not going downfield, but taking care of business and executing what they needed to execute. Does that come across to you as well, or am I crazy?
It does. I mean, obviously, there's no doubt to me. I thought the 2 best drives in that game against the Packers were the opening drive and the finishing drive. And in between was an indecipherable mess that I can't quite explain to you what was trying to be done and what was trying to be accomplished. Because it's still just an enigmatic mess that makes no sense to me. But yeah, I mean, once again, on that final drive, the Chiefs really went back to the principles of what they are. I mean, they were trying to what they need to be right now, which is run the football a little bit, get the ball out quickly, lean on your playmakers, and don't try and just force the ball downfield for the sake of forcing the ball downfield. Mm-hmm. They took some, some of the pass to Hill, to clinch it was probably a little bit more of a deeper ball than they planned on, mm-hmm. Just because it took Hill a little bit of time to break open. But even the big pass and the catch that Kelce had, I mean, that was classic Travis Kelce. You just kind of slip your defender a little bit, extend the route, find an open spot, and sit down in it and let Mahomes get the ball to you. I mean, that's what they need to do. I mean, that's classic Chiefs, and that was. I mean, I think the word that Mahomes or Andy Reid used was vintage on that final drive, and it was. If they just did what they did on the opening drive and the final drive, and just did it in between, I don't think they scored 49 points, but I think they put up a lot more than 13.
I am completely with you. And as I broke that last drive down in particular, the line held up pretty well for having gone through an entire ball game. They got a couple of guys with a little bit of pressure. They flushed Mahomes at one point, but this was Mahomes leaving the pocket when he needed to. It wasn't this categorical, oh, my first read wasn't open and I'm going to scramble around. He actually delivered the ball off of the correct foot. He planted it. Every ball on that drive looked good, and I felt my biggest takeaway after reviewing it, the all 22 again, is just that, hey, that looks like Patrick in a tough situation, but it looks like Patrick being Patrick again. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic. Maybe it was just he was feeling good that game, but I feel like that was a basis for him to move forward and continue to do what they did on that drive. If they do that, they should be able to get back and win consistently at this point, shouldn't they?
They should. I mean, let's face it. I mean, if Mahomes becomes Mahomes again, and I'm not even saying he has to be MVP Mahomes, but even 75% of MVP Mahomes right now would be enough, and it would be fine. Yeah, I'm with you, and I think you picked up on a couple of things there that, Patrick has talked about in the past when he has struggled. And we haven't heard him talking about it as much of late. And I think it's because there's just been a lot of other things going on and a lot of things are wrong. But he's consistently talked about in the past that when he has struggled, even had slumps, and in the past we've been normally talking about these being slumps in a game because he doesn't normally have 3-game slumps.
Right.
But what he's got to do is that he has to just get back to the basics. It's simply dropping back, working on his footwork, making sure that he's making fundamentally correct throws, progressing through his reads normally, and trusting his protection. And none of those things have been happening of late. And some of it begins up front. I mean, it does begin with Mahomes trusting his protection. And I think that probably that trust has been a bigger issue than we've probably have acknowledged. Because I think that you can look from the outside and say, you know what, the protection's been pretty good at times, but it hasn't necessarily been what he's expected. And it hasn't been what he's had in the past. And for a quarterback, that's a big change.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, he's still dealing with 5 new offensive linemen for the most part. And all 5 of those guys block differently. And especially the guys on the edges block a lot differently than Fisher and Schwartz did. And, I mean, I think we've seen it. I mean, he hasn't trusted that protection. And if he doesn't trust the protection, he's not going to be able to have the fundamentals that he needs to deliver the ball on time, on target. And he's not going to be able to go through his progressions.
That leaves us in a state now where that's a step forward. That's a little bit of a foundation, a glimpse of what you can be. Just a quick look ahead to this next week. That's got to be there again, I think, in order to move the ball well enough to put up enough points. I really don't know. I look at the Raiders and the Chiefs as 2 teams going in 2 different directions, but that's still got to be there in order to secure a win, doesn't it?
It does. You're right. I mean, I do. I mean, as much of a mess as we seem to think that the Chiefs have been of late, the Raiders are exceeding that as far as messiness goes. They're on a whole other planet right now. So, and this to me is a game that it's going to come down to the quarterbacks. I don't know how much it's going to be contingent on, either the defense is playing well or the playmakers playing well. I think it's going to be entirely about the quarterbacks and which ones show up. If the Patrick that, played in between that first and opening drive against the Packers shows up, this is going to be a long slog for the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. That said, if the same Derek Carr that played against the Giants last week shows up, I mean, we might be watching another 13-7 thriller in prime time on NBC. I'm hoping that's not the case. But to me, it's going to be the quarterbacks. If the quarterbacks, play well, don't turn the football over, whichever one does that the best and gets the most help from their supporting cast without too many drops or penalties, is going to win the game. And I mean, that sounds to me, I mean, it's fundamental football, but to me right now, this has been 2 teams that have been struggling with fundamental football for a while.
Well, let's hope that they can get it straight, folks. ChiefsDigest.com is where you can get all of Matt's work. Matt, thanks for all the time today.
Absolutely, Ryan. Take care, my friends.
Check it out, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.